So, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to the end-to-end rethinking of the media supply chain. My name's Darren Long. I'm not used to this. Normally I'm sitting on the panel. This time round I'm asking the questions, so maybe I'll go back to that if I do a terrible job. But firstly, I just want to say today we're really looking at the media supply chain. I think the amount of complexity that I've had over so many years, from the monolithical single systems that tries to do everything to now cloud-based, on-prem or in the cloud in data centers, end-to-end supply chain. What we're going to be exploring today is it really end-to-end? What does that really mean? Or do we just get rid of that word and actually just talk about capability and what the future is? So I'd like to introduce to you today my guests. So let me start with Jan-Hendrik Hein, who is Vice President of Media Operations over at the Hearst network. Jan has been working over at the Hearst network for many years, looking at the complexity and the diversity of the Hearst organization. He's done some very large media supply chain changes within the organization, and I think I'm really going to appreciate today your knowledge and expertise around some of the questions. We got Gabby Redfern, who is the Group Content Director at Sky. I should know that because I was that, but actually I've slightly forgotten it now. So Gabby runs a very multi-platform media supply chain across all the different parts of Sky's organisations and also into its European part of his organisation. Gabby's done 30 years of supply chains and media operations, so she's very adverse to the way that these systems work, and I'm sure she's got some great ideas and solutions for what the future is all about as well. Next person along is, we've got Nav Kangara, who is the VP of Sales and Business Development at TMT Insights. Nav is really spanning between that business and that sales world of media supply chains. He's a solutions provider, somebody who really thinks about what actually is going to be needed in organizations and how you stitch all of that together. And I have to say, we're really going to need his expertise as well. And then we've got Tom Dugenheim, who is the Vice President of Sales over at SDVI. And apologies, I've said your name wrong. So Tom's going to pronounce it correctly. Dugenheim, my apologies. So Tom is really, again, a seasoned broadcaster in media supply chains and works for SDVI, really looking at the complexity of media supply chains today. And I think with all of our panels today, we're going to start exploring. Now, we've got a very short period of time, and I normally talk too much, so I'm going to leave it now to my panel. So, Gabby, its first question to you is, look, Sky manages a vast array of content for multiple regions and platforms. So do you believe a single end-to-end platform can handle all the complexities, or are we just layering on more and more stitched together systems?
Thanks, Darren. Okay, so let me talk to you about how we think about end-to-end at Sky. So we think about it glass to glass. I'm sure everybody's heard that. Camera to consumer, ideally Sky Glass. And we have many functions, departments, and capabilities within this space. Do I think there's one overall Uber system that's going to cover all of that? No, I don't. But I think if you zoom in a bit, supply chain, so finish master, ingest to on-air. Oh dear, I've already broken it. Operator error, sorry. So yeah, when you think about ingest to on-air or publish, we have our content platform, and we are working with my co-panelists here from TMT and SDVI on this platform. Darren, you were at Sky when we started that journey, and I feel like we're in the middle, but I loved your point about does it really end, and I think you're right. But where we are on the journey at the moment, we're trying to streamline, we're trying to converge across Sky Group, across all of our different territories onto this single content platform. And we've already got several of our UK workflows onboarded, and this year we're currently focused on Germany. with Italy and some other workflows to come next. And I have to give a big shout out to the Sky team that I can see in the audience, because they're doing all of the hard work to make it happen. Ben, Becky, Glenn, Tom, I can see everybody. I just have to give them a big shout out. So that's sort of how I'm thinking about it.
So just slightly adding to that, and you can obviously, the complexity that we layer into all of that, do you find now that actually when you start looking across that middle bit that you're in at the moment, can you see that actually it's getting easier or harder?
This constant change and challenge, and I think, we overcome one challenge and, we can see improvements, but then, we've got the next thing that we've got to deal with, whether it's, AI, that's sort of one of the things that we're all thinking about.
Which we'll come back to.
Yeah. Yes, but, there's a lot to do.
There's a lot to do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move to Nav. So Nav, you're about the end-to-end solution. So if you look at what TMT does as an organization, and if anyone doesn't know TMT, it's how they effectively have that operating system that sits across all the disparate systems and actually really gives a clear view. But if you're looking at your world, is it just about that big system that actually you just layer on some clever UI on top, or is it about how you stitch together in a really clever way that sort of end-to-end solution?
Yeah, sure. So I guess at TMT, what we try and do is kind of look at the supply chain. Yes, the phrase end-to-end is from one part of a supply chain right to the end, and what that means is very different for every broadcaster or content owner. But if we're asking the question of looking at end-to-end as a single monolithic platform that does everything in one single vendor or offering, compared to where we kind of play as TMT, which is looking at that area where broadcasters or content owners are looking at modular systems, modular pieces of technology that are kind of best in breed in each area, and tying those together, we feel that the industry has moved drastically to that side, away from the single monolithic vendor. And there's there are lots of reasons for that, but I mean, I kind of look back on my own experience of coming into the industry when we were analog, things were very manual, we were having to do things on a physical basis. Then we moved to, let's say, the first phases of building supply chains in the digital world, which was looking at niche pieces of technology that could automate little pieces. And that became very difficult, so we started looking at the big monolithic platform that could do everything, that had the bells and whistles, that could make it easier for us. The drawbacks that we've seen, and I've experienced them myself, as many of you have as well, that you start getting things like vendor tie-in. You've got long deployment periods because you're having to design and build everything for a one-off deployment. And then things like, slow innovation. How can we start making changes much quicker on a simple basis? But yeah, so long story short, I and TMT believe that the single monolithic platform that does everything, it served its purpose. It was very good, and it was needed at that moment of time. We moved to an area now where technology, software, being able to do things yourselves, that area is actually driving and helping achieve a lot more in terms of some of the bigger, larger business objectives and goals that you want to achieve. Things like flexibility, scalability, reduced costs, all those great things. So we, as an organization, we know there is a place for that. There is a single monolithic. There are areas where it makes sense. If you want to outsource, if you want to be more hands-off, for those technologists amongst us, we very much feel that that's an area that gives you a lot more in return.
So monolithical is dead. Long live the, how can I say, diverse and complex world of the new supply chain, which
right.
Hopefully being made simpler with certainly solutions and opportunities within looking at great UI and great sort of automation across the top of it. Okay, so Jan, you work with a huge diverse organization pushing out to 100 countries, just all of your content. That must be incredibly hard when you're developing and designing supply chains. So how do you deal with localization and the complexities around localization? Is it just an overwhelming mess of lots of countries requesting lots of things in lots of different formats, or is it starting to get to a point where you believe you can control the beast that is localization?
I'd like to think that we have started to control the beast of localization. We were a few years ago in a situation where we had offices in Rome, Johannesburg, Warsaw, Munich, Madrid, and everyone doing things in a slightly different way. And that's for historic reasons, because it was all on-prem, isolated in your own silos. We've put a lot of effort into aligning that, into standardizing the processes around localization and versioning and compliance, and making sure that we have starting off with a clear vision and a solution design that introduces some certain standardization across the board. Because yes, our broadcast and content owners have some unique requirements, but in the end, if you're looking at it high level enough, we're not that unique. You're all getting content in, you do something to it, and you send it back out. So if you're trying to standardize those elements where there's repetitive, high volume tasks, content flowing from content or metadata flowing from one system to another, then I think you can achieve a lot through automation. And when it comes to localization itself, so the process of dubbing and subtitling, that's where we work with trusted partners in regions, in local dubbing studios and global language service providers. And again, we've made a huge effort in standardizing how we integrate with them, that they're all inter-rally. The small houses, the mom and pop shops, as I like to call them, that don't have a big technology department, that might not be in the cloud yet, but provide an excellent quality service when it comes to dubbing in big territories like the fakes. We give them a simple integration into Rally with a gateway where they can upload and download content. Those bigger vendors that have their own technology team and roadmap and probably know more about technology than I do, for those we have a more complex and automated integration.
Okay, I think we're all grappling with really complex systems and the way that we work and how we're going to work in the future. So I'd just like to explore something with Tom here, because it's all about data nowadays. So you just mentioned obviously the complexities and how difficult it is, but Tom, data-driven insights. You've got a real obviously understanding now from an organization at SDVI around media supply chains and whether companies are actually using that data in an appropriate way. In other words, are they looking at how much things cost, when to process, how they process, whether they bring their own licenses, whether they use burst and obviously spin up services. Where do you feel that companies are going? Are they really using that data insights, or do you believe still there's a lot of maturity that needs to come into the whole media supply chain?
So the short answer is yes, they are using the data. As you mentioned, if you have a fully integrated supply chain, you can manage your cost, you can manage how long each task will take on every asset to an individual asset and component level. So it's hugely important for our clients anyway to take that data. It takes a while. It's not something you suddenly switch on and overnight you have all the answers. A really good example is we have a client in the US who had been using Rally for a while, and then this will sound ridiculous, like why didn't you know this at the beginning? The realization was that most of their assets were costing pretty much the same amount to process, but not all their assets were the same value. So why were they spending the same amount of money on content, which was, more expensive, maybe something you're showing late in the evening? So what they were able to do with the data was then to decide, okay, so for category A content, we'll shift that down this kind of a supply chain, which maybe is using a less expensive transcoder, for example, or a less expensive QC tool. So those decisions allowed them to be more efficient, run things at the same time, and to reduce their costs.
So I think one thing which I've certainly noticed in supply chains, and I think we're all guilty of this, which is, when you can do so much with supply chains and you can burst and you can push things into the cloud, that has an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage is it gives you a huge capability in the organization. The disadvantage is cost, and I think what you are explaining is ultimately not everything should be gold-plated. There should be, different amounts of cost we put against different content. So I think from a media supply chain, the one thing I constantly push out is that we should always look to see how we use data to try and define value in content and be a lot smarter in the future around how that works. So
absolutely, you can't white glove everything.
No, not at all.
Gotta be careful.
And look, just leading on to that, if I go to you, Gabby, I'm sorry, we've got to talk about AI. It's always going to be in every conversation we have. And I think we've got to be really careful when we speak about AI because it's a bit of a buzzword, but it also is bringing opportunity. And I think, Gabby, if you look at AI and what you're starting to think about at Sky, is it a tool that you really are now understanding and actually really want to use in the organisation from a media supply chain, or are you still just playing it at Sky?
Yeah, thanks, Darren. So I think it's a really interesting and exciting space for all of us. And there's lots of different use cases, and we're at different stages of discovery, testing. We've got some things operational. We are finding it's we've got to keep testing, keep looking at it because it's moving pretty quickly. And so things that perhaps weren't quite there, suddenly rapidly moving forward. So far I would say our experience is that it's assisting our operations. So it's not replacing, it's assisting. And where we have use cases operational is within our synthetic voices. We talked about audio description and some localization, and also in our subtitling areas as well. But I just think this is going to continue to develop. It's going to scale. We're at the early stages.
And I think that's a really good point. I think we are at the early stages. I think, some of the things which I'm super excited about for the future is just around agents and the way that they can handle the beast of data. We're all dealing with that complexity around data. And I think if you look at how we integrate into data today, it's very hard, it's very difficult, and every single thing we do around data is slightly different in slightly different formats. I think the exciting thing around AI is around what the opportunity is around agents in the future. So I hope people start really experimenting, and I've seen some really clever things, certainly in the media supply chain of the future. Now, we've got to move on. So, look, you're in a privileged position because you can look across supply chains and be a bit smart in some respects around obviously what works, what doesn't work, what are the strategies, what's the advice you can give people. Sometimes you're in meetings, I'm sure you want to say something, but you don't want to offend. Here, you can offend everyone. So what advice would you give to people, and what mistakes are people making?
Yeah, so I guess, in those kind of discussions with clients and, partners as well, we try and take kind of a step back from, supply chain technology and all those bits. Take a step back first and look at your business objective, look at your business goals, look at where you want to be, not just tomorrow, not next year, but in a few years' time. 5 years is a good angle. Where do you want to be, and what are those kind of goals and objectives? And then what we try and do is map those to, what does that translate to in supply chain talk, let's say. So, does it mean that we want increased scalability? That we want to be able to process more content and make more sales, for example? Or, do we want to reduce costs because we drive profitability, X, Y, and Z? So you want to start looking at those translations from the business goals and objectives. Your supply chain should map to those, and obviously it'll be slightly different because it'll be maybe a little bit more technical, a bit more operational. But you want to look at each of those pieces. So if you're looking at things like scale, if you're looking at things like flexibility, if you're starting to let's say, build your supply chain for the first time, I will offend many people and say that you need to be in the cloud. You have to. I mean, if you're not in the cloud by now, You have to have a desire to get to the cloud.
Costs a lot of money, though.
It can, but also using data to inform decisions and make better decisions, you can keep your costs lower. And also, if you're, you're still incurring a cost by having that on-premise, right? I think people tend to overlook those kind of total cost of those operations and think, well, we've got a data center there, it runs itself, the power's there, the cooling's there, you still pay for that.
Yeah.
So, yes, the first and foremost, you need to be in the cloud. If you're not today, you have to be in the future. You need to start driving that, because that will unlock so many of those benefits and so many of those bits that will actually end up enabling some of those bits at the business level, things like reduced costs and flexibility and scalability. Beyond that, then, if you're looking at your supply chain, you have to make sure that you start looking at your software layers. You want to start looking at across all those pieces, and then you want to start looking at your operating models and all of that. So, yeah, I mean, it all depends on where you're at in that discussion. Sometimes you are much further along.
Okay.
Sometimes you're looking at driving it, but yeah.
So he's offended everyone here today that says if you're not in the cloud, then you're not in the club. All right. So get in the cloud. But it could be a private cloud, not necessarily an AWS or a Google Cloud. So Jan, cloud.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, you've done a lot, okay, and you've done a lot of implementation. You've had a journey. Can you just give us a bit of essence of, well, okay, during that journey, what did you learn about it?
I think we learned everything about it, because at the start of the journey, we were quite aware that we didn't have a lot of cloud experience.
Yep.
So we knew there was going to be a lot of unknowns. And so I think there weren't any huge surprises along the way, because we were aware up front that it would require a lot of work. So rather than rushing into the project, we did a lot of education about what it means being in the cloud, what the benefits might be, what the challenges would be. We started building up skills in the team. We also complemented the project team with additional consultants that helped us in, that had a track record experience of experienced cloud architects to help us with some of the complex challenges. We also land on our friends at A&E and at Sky. I think you and I had a call during lockdown to ask you about what's cloud, what's all that about then. And so we did a lot of research at the start, and we also did a lot of planning, and you mentioned the cloud cost, and the CapEx to OpEx shift is huge, and so we did a lot of work with the business, with our finance partners.
Did they get it?
Our CFO. Yes, they did, and we managed to explain it in a way that we didn't bamboozle them with technology term, but actually explained what the benefits of the business were. I think we started the project also at the right point where our on-prem hardware was end of life, and it was either, okay, spend X million on more of the same, or let's do something different, something better. So a big part of it was the vision that we can integrate people working from home, people working from the London office, from the Munich office, or in Poland at home. Everyone could, in this new environment, have the same visibility, the same access, being able to collaborate, and then also that then allows you to reinvent your workforce, because I think in the cloud, if you're just doing lift and shift, you're not getting the benefits, you're just having the potentially cost challenges. But being able to reimagine how our teams work together and how we work together as our partners, how tasks can easily be shared. So we did, and I'm happy to say also that our AWS budget in the moment is tracking 10% under, which is, I think it's perfect.
Okay, so you've got a perfect supply chain.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think a really good point, and sorry, we've got about a minute 30, so a couple of things. If you have put a Slido in, I'm not sure I'm going to 100% get there in time, but the one thing I will just say is don't reinvent the wheel. In other words, you've got to think about how you're going to use it, and don't just lift and shift into the cloud. Really think about how you're going to do the future of it. So Tom, your world, it's all about supply chains and complexity and the future. So how does SDVI really work with formats that I don't even know are going to come along in the future? Can we really cope with those things? Or is it something which is just layering in another set of complexities? Or is it genuinely, in your view, a simple fix?
From a supply chain perspective, we're agnostic to formats. We don't, like, whatever comes along, we'll deal with. And that's because of the ecosystem. It's because of the partners that we work with. So to go back to your point earlier on about monolithic systems and things promising that they'll do everything end to end, if we're in an environment where we have an ecosystem with lots of different vendors working together, then those problems are easily solved. Whereas if you're a closed shop and you're waiting on somebody to invent a new format, you're going to be in trouble. So.
Okay, so I've just looked at the Slido. The good news is there's only one, but I'm going to apologise to that person. I am going to ask a quick final question to all my audience before Lisa pulls me off the stage. What are the worst terms in the world of media supply chains you'd like to eradicate, Jan?
The worst.
The worst terms that we use on a regular basis in media supply chain that you'd like to get out of?
Ma'am.
I agree with you. Ma'am, definitely. Okay.
I was just going to say jargon. There's so much jargon.
Well, there's a lot of jargon. Ma'am was an old jargon, but yeah, I agree. Acronyms are not great. Yep, agreed.
I would say powered by AI. I think.
Okay, let's get
I
rid
don't
of
like that
AI.
phrase. No,
Okay.
AI's fine, but the powered by AI.
So if you see any stands saying the power of AI,
I don't like it.
don't go there.
Yeah.
Smash them
Right,
up.
okay. Tom,
Human in the loop drives me nuts.
human in the loop.
Yeah, I don't
What
like
does that mean?
Exactly.
Can I thank Jan, Gabby, Nav, Tom for today's supply chain conversation? I have to say, I had about another 20 questions for them. I would love to carry it on. I have to say, this subject is super interesting. The future of this media supply chain is going to be what actually allows all of us to cope with our day-to-day jobs. And I think thanks to these people and the people working in the industry, I think we've got an exciting future. And I think it's going to be a really interesting future, certainly with some of the capabilities coming on. But thank you for your time today and thank you for coming.